Hello, and welcome back to day 3 of the summer series by Inspiring Workplaces and in partnership with H&H. I'm Matt Manners, the CEO and founder of Inspiring Workplaces Group. It's great to be back again. One quick point, over the past 2 or 3 days, I seem to have developed a very annoying habit of slapping the table as I'm talking, which is naturally then making a wobble on the screen. So I will try and stop doing this through the rest of the summer series, because it might be making you feel a bit seasick at home, and in your workplaces. So apologies for that. It's been an absolutely incredible first 2 days, and we're not letting up in day 3. All the content is on demand right now, and like I said, a real flavor of content, different topics, and very, very thought-provoking, lots of advice in there. So definitely worth going back and viewing on demand if you haven't already seen it. Yesterday's talk around communications and storytelling was actually so impactful to me personally that I'm actually revisiting my own talk structure that I'd planned to do on Friday. So that's going to be a standalone session either later this summer or earlier in the autumn/fall, depending where you live in the world. So tomorrow will be our final day, and I'll be coming back with a far better session than originally planned because of one of our storytellers. As I've said already, Inspiring Workplaces have a mission to try and change the world through the world of work, and we help doing that by providing you with for free community to exchange ideas, all these events for free, all the content, articles, ebooks, videos, podcasts. So please do keep exploring. We have hundreds of other sessions just like this on the website as well. But let's focus back on today, day 3, in partnership with H&H. Our first storyteller is one of the most inspiring and authentic people I know. Always lifts my spirits when I meet and catch up with them. And I'm sure today will be no different. She's been a judge for our awards in the past year gone by, in fact, a culture expert, and is bringing us a talk today on something we started to explore, she introduced me to, but she's been exploring for a long time, at our Inspire London event. The title of the session is Intersectionality Explored from Concept to Reality. So without further ado, please welcome to the summer series, Alya Lilani. Hello.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Very well. Good to see you. How are you?
It's lovely to see you too. I feel like I'm filled with so many things to say right now. One being thank you for such a lovely introduction. And second, I'm not seasick, but I'm just now looking at the screen, which is brilliant. But it's fine, don't worry.
Yeah, I know. I don't know why I've started doing that. So I need to have restraints or something. So anyway,
you're very passionate about what you're talking about.
Clearly. Well, thank you for that. And I know you are. And so I've been looking forward to learning more around this topic. So please, without further ado, let's get me off the screen and let you get started.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm not using any slides today. I'm just going to talk. But I will warn you that I do live right next to a hospital. So if you do hear the sirens, apologies. So today, intersectionality, what does it mean? Intersectionality is a word that we use a lot in equity, diversity, and inclusion. And at the same time, we actually don't use it enough. So today I wanted to start by quickly covering what the term intersectionality means for anyone who might not know this word. Intersectionality is a term that was coined in 1989 by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a professor, a lawyer, an activist, and a scholar of race theory. And she used it to explain how some personal characteristics interact and overlap with each other. So Kimberly Crenshaw worked with a group of lawyers who spent their careers studying the ways a person's different identities, particularly focusing on the overlap of gender, race, and class, could come together and affect them, and mostly in a negative way, and particularly within the justice system. Hopefully everyone who's watching this, we all have unconscious bias. We know that we do. We can't help it. We all do it. It takes us 7 seconds to make up our mind about something or someone. And as humans, we have a natural neurological fight or flight reflex. This is designed to protect us from danger. It helps us assess situations quickly. And it goes back to our primitive roots where we couldn't afford to take a moment to challenge those first impressions. Now, whilst unconscious bias is biological, the structures that are in our systems are not. And what shapes us is the bigger society that we live in and those systems that are in place to support these biases, which is why we often hear something called systemic bias or institutional bias. And it's why biases like homophobia and racism still exist. Crenshaw and her team claim that the legal system worked in favor of some demographics and against others. And with her team, they identified that the systems that were built benefited individuals and were biased against women, ethnic minorities, and those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. So while the system disadvantages all women and all ethnic minority and people from ethnic minority backgrounds, a woman from an ethnic minority background doubles down on oppression and disadvantage. So the theory of intersectionality was founded on the intersection. Every time I say intersection, I want to go like this, but the intersection of race, gender, and class. But as our culture has evolved from, over the last 30 years, our various identities have evolved too. And since 2017, the term and definition of intersectionality has become much more widely adopted. So it's much more commonly used to explain the experiences of people who have various overlapping marginalized identities across workplaces and across different spaces. Essentially, intersectionality is a framework for understanding how any of the isms, so classism, sexism, any of those isms, or any social justice problems come together, create unique challenges, and that could be from power struggle to oppression and many forms of advantage or disadvantage, but they affect people in multiple ways and build on those layers of injustice. There's a lot of words there, so I'm going to put it into an example. But a South Asian woman who identifies as a lesbian will share some challenges that women face. She will face some challenges that lesbians face. She will face some challenges that members of the South Asian community face, but she might have added struggles that neither women nor members of the LGBTQ+ community or South Asian men share. And addressing her as only one of these attributes doesn't do enough to recognize her whole and holistic experience. Hopefully that makes sense. And if we move on from talking about its history and where it comes from, let's talk about this in real terms. And to do so, I'm going to share a bit about myself and my personal journey with you. So a few years ago, I attended a leadership course with the rising stars of the organization that I was working for at the time, where we were each asked to bring a metaphor for ourselves. Honestly, I panicked. I was on the course because of my leadership role in diversity and inclusion at the time. I was also the youngest in the room, so I had a bit of imposter syndrome about being there. I had just come out as bisexual to myself and very few people in my life. I was questioning myself in many ways, to be honest. So how in the world did I know what metaphor I was going to bring? Did I know myself if I didn't know what metaphor I wanted to bring? Was I even passionate about anything? Be our authentic selves. We've all heard this phrase, I'm sure we have. It's in a lot of engagement surveys. And when we talk about belonging, which is intrinsically linked to inclusivity, we talk about be our true selves or be our authentic selves. Now, when we say be your true self in a work context, our true self tends to be defined by our characteristics, by being a woman, by being an ethnic minority, by being part of the LGBTQ+ community. But if all of these aspects of me intersect, sometimes I don't know how I can be authentic to all of them at the same time. My 90-year-old Muslim grandparents live in Kenya, and my grandma told me when I was 27 that I had one good year left. I should find a man quickly. I'm sure there are probably some shocked expressions there, but my grandparents had an arranged marriage in the Congo when they were 18. They had their first child when they were 19, and she had 3 children in primary school by the time that she was 27. Now, my female partner, who is Zimbabwean, we went to Africa last year, to Kenya and to Zimbabwe to visit our families. And when we went to visit our families, my mum told me at the time, we're going to tell people that you are friends. I didn't have a say at all in the matter. Now, my mother was born in Rwanda. She identifies strongly with her Rwandese and our Rwandese and Indian roots. And with that come many beliefs that uphold certain stereotypes and, unfortunately, certain prejudices. Now, I don't blame either of them, and nor the wider family, because it's a part of their culture, it's where they grew up, and it's where they live. As I explained, systemic bias and institutional bias is all around us. It's what shapes the societies that we live in. Now, if we look at that in reality, systemic bias exists heavily across the world. It is still illegal to be gay in Kenya. Their neighboring countries uphold anti-LGBTQ plus laws, and even severe punishments were put in place in Uganda in April 2023. That's literally last year. We're seeing a rise of this in East Africa generally. As an individual and as a person, I love and respect my African and Indian cultures and where I come from. If I love them that much and I am not challenging what's happening with my family, am I being authentic to the bisexual part of me? To that woman who doesn't agree with certain gender stereotypes that play out. Now, I could have told my grandparents at the time. I could have spoken up and refused to introduce my girlfriend as a friend rather than as my partner rather than my friend. In fact, when I told the story at the Inspiring Workplaces Inspire Circle last year or earlier this year, my grandparents didn't know about my partner, but since then they have been told. My mother told them. They do now. We still don't talk about it. And to be honest, we don't need to, not yet. I'm okay with that. I have to say, though, that they've come a hell of a long way since then. And I think part of that is me not wanting to cross those boundaries. However, if I don't know how I'm being authentic to all of these sides of who I am, if I don't know how I'm being authentic, how do I bring that to work? And how do organizations even know where to start in supporting this? So whilst Kimberlé Crenshaw talked about the layers of oppression and added challenges that come with intersectionality, there's oppression that happens amongst the groups themselves. There are groups that I feel like I should belong to, but I feel like sometimes I don't fully belong. Unfortunately, yes, I've experienced racism, homophobia, sexism, and more to count. And I call out the inappropriate comments, microaggressions, and behaviors, but not everybody will feel the same or comfortable or confident enough to be able to call out those microaggressions or behaviors. Because sometimes, and there's this brilliant video that you should check out if you haven't seen it, it's all about microaggressions being mosquito bites. Well, they're one of nature's most annoying facts. If you only get bitten every now and then, it's not so bad, but the more and more we get bitten, it actually becomes much more of an impact on us psychologically. My personal challenge within this is managing the battles between the intersecting identities of who I am. So some days I feel more Indian, some days I feel more British, some days I feel more queer, some days, or very rare days, I fancy going to the mosque. But I am not just a woman. I'm not just in my 30s. I'm not just British Indian, and many more. I'll come to talk about this later. But if I don't know how to look at these intersecting identities or the challenges that come with it, how do companies know what to do? Now, for equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies, efforts, and initiatives to be truly, truly impactful, we need them to better understand and apply intersectionality in the workplace. I'm sure we've all seen it, particularly in the last 4 to 5 years. We've seen an increase in the attention, effort, and even budgets that go towards equity, diversity, and inclusion. It's great, right? We know it's good commercially. We know it's brilliant for employee engagement and well-being and retention, and especially at that individual level for psychological safety. But often these strategies are done with a single focus. So a strategy that looks at one or maybe two demographics. Let's focus on women. Let's focus on ethnic minorities. Let's focus on disability. We know that it's better to start with one thing and do it well. And so while this is well intended, it can often be problematic. Now, if we look at it on what companies can do and look at the employee engagement surveys, for example, taking a client who I've previously worked with, this is a real example of an engagement score that came out as 82% favorable. So that was made up from the 5 different questions that they used to score on engagement. Great, that went up by 5% year on year from the previous year. Now, if we filtered that 82% to the female perspective, women scored with a 76% agreement. So the engagement score for women was 76% compared to 82%. If we looked at this from the Black population, that went down to 68%. We then filtered this further to look at the crossover or intersection of Black and female respondents. And that engagement score went down to 46%. Now, that is a huge difference from the original 82%. So while we can say the engagement score had gone up, actually, when we're looking at the particular pockets and intersections, that was not the case for our Black female population, or that company's Black female population. So we can also translate this to looking at gender pay gaps. We look at our pay, hopefully companies have started to look at pay gaps further, but possibly just looking at the gender pay gap. Companies have started looking at ethnicity pay gaps as well. But what it would be really beneficial is to look at what a Black or Indian woman makes in comparison to a white man. There's a brilliant article on Culture Amp, and we can forward this around afterwards, where it says, and I'll quote, "Just focusing on one gender may only be benefiting a subset of the population that's already further ahead." Also, imagine that you're a Black woman working for a company that says, "We're focusing on women." You're being implicitly told, sure, we care, but only about a part of your identity, the one that we are familiar and comfortable with. So in that article, Culture Amp says it's really important to think about looking at this from the intersectional lens so we don't start to alienate people in some shape or form. There's also a question about ERGs, employee resource groups, and networks, as women from ethnic minority groups can often feel that a particular women's group doesn't always serve their particular needs. So what does that mean for networks? It's really important that networks and employee resource groups support each other. When it is, for example, Pride, are all of the other networks highlighting the disabled LGBTQ plus employees within the organization, perhaps the ethnic minority employees within the organization? How can we make sure that we are looking for those, sorry, the siren's going off again, but how can we make sure that all of these networks work together to support each other to make sure we're making it the best possible workspace? At the end of the day, when we advocate for and champion workplace equity, we need curiosity, we need compassion, we need listening and learning from other people's experiences, and that can often feel quite uncomfortable. A really good friend of mine, and who does a lot of great work in this space, said to me once a few years ago, and it's never left my head, if we make this a safe space for a Black trans woman with a disability, then the world becomes a better place for everyone else, because by default, everyone in between, it will become much easier for them as well. So all of these interlocking identities, our race, our socioeconomic status, our sexuality, our gender, whatever that might be, they matter to our personal experiences. And if we acknowledge these intersections, it helps us understand the systems that are in place and how they affect us differently. Every one of us has a unique experience. We need to stop putting people into boxes. Women in their being in your 30s, ethnic minority, African roots. I'm talking about my intersections here. But we need to stop talking about those individual boxes and start talking more about intersectionality, because it's really important to honor and recognize a person's full identity. It is not about those personal characteristics, but about how each of them compound with each other. Each and every person falls under a characteristic in some shape or form, and they have a lived experience. We talk about allyship in the sense of D&I, and if we want to act as allies, or if I want to act as an ally to a transgender man, a Black woman, or a non-binary person with a disability, I cannot overlook the full complexity of that person's identity and the challenges that they individually might face. So an intersectional approach means that communities and movements are more inclusive of those differences, and they work together towards a more equitable workplace and equitable world, where we truly belong. So the more that we can approach equity, diversity, and inclusion with this intersectional lens, we can become more effective in how we use data. We become more effective in what developmental and support solutions we implement. So perhaps introducing more coaches, more female ethnic minority coaches or therapists, or introducing new specific development solutions that look at particular intersections. And ultimately, hopefully, utopia is that we become more effective in fighting injustice overall. And that's it.
Fantastic. Again, I already said to you before we went live that if I come back a little bit ruffled, it's because I'm just trying to take everything in, and here I am. I'm just trying to take everything in. Just a quick question before I get into it, because I don't know whether you saw news out of America and SHRM last week removing the term equity out of DE&I. And I wondered if you had any thoughts, and if you did, whether you'd want to share your views on that.
So I'll be honest, and I'll say I've seen a little bit, but not enough to perhaps comment on the America stance on it. But hearing that question in particular, I think this is a difficult one, because we tend to, not when I say we, I don't mean you and I mean the collective we, tend to, as humans, either when we're trying to advance one thing, sometimes it feels like we're taking that in the place of something else.
Yeah.
There have been, waves of people not liking being your whole self, feeling like you truly can belong. At first, it wasn't just about diversity and inclusion. It's now equity has to be involved, and equity is not the same as equality. So I actually think that equity is still important to acknowledge, but the space that we're in here is, this is going to continue to develop. This is going to continue to change. And as we, hopefully as humans, start to evolve and learn more and acknowledge all these differences that happen in the world, it won't actually be about equaling the playing field, which is the definition of equity. It will hopefully just be about being good people, which sounds like such a simple concept, but unfortunately tends to be so difficult.
No, I think the way you explain that is perfect. And I think because you don't, for something to move forward and progress, it doesn't have to be at the expense of something else. And so taking the point that those terms, or then talking about the different elements that make up who you are, I think sometimes one of the issues I think we have is trying to create a culture within an organization that assumes positive intent and isn't at odds. So if we're trying to move forward one part of our community, that's not going to take away budget or mean you're going to have less opportunity as well. So because instantly you get political within organizations, if you have this, I have less, therefore, but actually what we're trying to talk about is everybody can move forward. It's just trying to find that way.
Absolutely. It's funny because I had someone describe it to me once as oppression Olympics. It's like saying my struggle is much more difficult than your struggle, and then it becomes like a fight, which is why actually it shouldn't be one against the other. It shouldn't be that we're trying to advance one thing. And my understanding as well of and I'll definitely share this article with you, a few articles for people to read, but it is that sometimes the intention's always hopefully coming from a good place, but the impacts can be so much more significant. And if we define intention, our intent is what we set out when we want to go and do something, and the impact is the knock-on effect of it. Sometimes they don't match, but it's like when we say something without knowing the impact of what it's going to do psychologically. But absolutely, if we just try to do it all collectively to just say, let's make this a better place, then it's not about advancing one particular group over another.
And creating that freedom to learn and be curious and make mistakes as you learn and listen.
And I think that is the worry more than anything, is people are too scared to say the wrong things, to challenge something, or to voice their own opinions. And actually psychological safety on top of everything is so much more important.
Yeah. Well, Thank you so much. As I said, we want to continue to explore this, and I think we will, hopefully, in other ways. I think there's definitely some content that we can pull together, maybe as a book, but we can talk about that offline.
Absolutely.
But I wanted to continue this conversation that we started together with an intimate, inspiring of like 25 people. But now this goes out to the wider world, and hopefully can start sparking off some ideas for people in organisations and impacting tens of thousands of people. So I'm just very grateful for you sharing your story and putting it front of mind for the rest of us.
Thank you. Always great to speak to you, Matt. And yeah, looking forward to chatting more about intersectionality and how we can help people put it more into practice.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of the summer.
And you, the next 3 days of it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much to Alya there. And I hope that's got you thinking in many different ways. Alya had the sirens of being outside a hospital. I actually have an international air show in my town this week. So if you do hear a jet engine firing above me, I'm okay. They're supposed to be here. But we're moving on to our second storyteller of day 3. And as we spoke about backstage, someone I've been wanting to speak to and have on the summer series for a long time. So the excitement is high. And it's a great honor to make it become a reality. A regular contributor to Forbes and Harvard Business Review, as well as a TEDx speaker, he is respected and passionate about his area of expertise all over the world. His talk on building a culture of appreciation, people don't want to leave, is a timeless topic, I think. But this talk today really focuses on the very real problems that so many of us are trying to tackle right now. So please welcome to the summer series, world-renowned Christopher Littlefield.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for having me. And Alya, I'm like so much that I'm ingesting right now. From what you just shared, both your own story and the work that you're doing and the extreme importance of having those kind of conversations and understanding all the different things that people are living and they're going through on their day-to-day in their lived worlds that make up the complexity that is life. Yeah. And how do we make the space for that to create the kind of environment where people feel like, hey, I can show up. And by the way, this is going on. I just went on this trip. This is what was going on with my grandparents. This is what I could share and could not share. And by the way, this is just kind of going on for me right now. So if I'm a little bit distant in this next meeting, this is what's happening.
I mean, if we can create the space for us to have those conversations, then like I've always said, we're trying to tackle the world's problems inside work, but we can be solving them outside as well. If we start to create individuals that can actually be open and curious to understanding who we all are, because we're all different. So, like I said, very, very grateful to Alya and sharing. But on to you, my man, and I'm going to leave you to it, and then we'll speak afterwards.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. And Matt and I shared, I think we've had meetings scheduled maybe 10 times. And just being human of, hey, he'll send me a message. By the way, I just got off the road and I'm sick from my trip. And the next one is like, hey, by the way, I've got to cancel last minute. I got to go pick my kid up. And the next one is, hey, you know what? I thought I could do this, but in reality, I'm so tired from yesterday. And I think we've rescheduled 10 times. And here I am as a speaker at this series this summer. And I think there's a lot to say about understanding each other's worlds and understanding what we take each day. So in this session, we're talking about nurturing a culture of appreciation that people don't want to leave. And right out of the gates, I want to give a couple concrete things that we can use, because many of us are going so fast sometimes that we forget to slow down. And if we could actually pull my slides up right now. One of the first things that we want to do when we join a meeting, and of course, we're halfway through the meeting, and if you could answer into the chat right now, I would. But when we join meetings, many times people come into the meetings and everyone's like, how's everyone doing today? And then we'd immediately jump into that content and we forget to slow down that people are coming from something and going to something. So one of the first questions we want to ask, whether it's an in-person meeting or a virtual meeting, is what were you doing 5 minutes before this meeting? Because how many times do we come in and someone's like, Okay, let's jump into it. And we're still in the last meeting. We haven't gone to the bathroom. We haven't ate lunch. We haven't transitioned from one conversation to the next. So one simple way to trigger empathy within ourselves and the other people that we're meeting with is start by always asking this question. And it will help people transition and also be aware of what everyone else is going through. And if someone goes, I was just in another meeting, I did some work with L'Oreal last month. And literally one of the prep meetings, somebody was running from one meeting to the next on their phone. I'm like, we're talking about a keynote, right? It doesn't matter. Do you need to pause? Do you need to do that? And it just shows people that we're present to their humanity. And then afterwards, we want to start with some welcome questions. And I will give you a link to be able to email my practice manager, Christine, later on today. And one of the other things we want to do is we want to start with a welcome question. And this may be something like, hey, what's one thing that made you smile recently? Or one thing you learned recently? Or one thing that made you laugh recently? And then you have people put their answers into the chat there. And it triggers a little bit of empathy among each other. Now, another thing that we can do right out of the gates is we can also, many times we check in and we ask people, how's everybody doing today? And then people respond, I'm fine, I'm okay. Because many of us are going so fast that we don't even know how to answer that question. And so another thing that we can do is we can use a quick check or a pulse check question. Now, what is a pulse check question? When people get on, we may ask the question, and you can, if you're meeting virtually, have people answer in the chat. And if you're meeting live, they can hold it up on their hands. I just did this with Bright Horizons, a childcare company last week. And we said, if you're in person, just put on your hands or make a scale. And instead of asking people, how are you doing, which many of us don't know how to answer some days, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your energy level today? 10 being high, 1 being completely drained. And then have people put their answers into the chat. Or you can say, hey, how valued do you feel in the workplace right now? On a scale of 10, down. And then you follow up by asking, why did you pick the number you did? And is there anything you, I, or the team could do to bring that number up? Now, these are great tools to use if you're in a hospital and you're rounding to be able to check in with people quickly. If you're facilitating an offsite with people to be able to check in. If you've launched a new software, a new initiative at work and saying, how clear is this for you? 10, completely clear, 1, not clear on all. Or how on board do you feel on this? 10, completely on board, 1, not at all. And then have people explain out their answers. But there's 2 things right out of the gate that we can use to be able to spark conversations, get people connecting, and help people see where everybody's at, regardless of the amount of time that we have. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about how do you nurture a cultural appreciation that people don't want to leave. Now, Matt shared in the beginning that my background is cultural appreciation. And if you go online and you search my name and my YouTube channel and all the rest, you're going to find a lot of content around appreciation. But what you won't find is a lot of stuff talking about my actual background. And this is something that I'm working to change because I started my career working in international conflict resolution, doing what's called track 2 diplomacy work, facilitating dialogues between people from either side of protracted international conflicts like Israel and Palestine, which has a very different context now, between Indians and Pakistanis, Greek and Turkish Cypriots, folks from Armenia and Azerbaijan. I think I went to the Caucasus 10 times to run dialogues. And then I ran dialogues between people from all sides of the Syrian conflict in the heart of the civil war in Lebanon. And then I started doing this work between senior members of the UN, and then the hardest work facilitating inside corporate cultures between marketing and finance, or marketing and sales. And my job was to go into a team that was maybe working in silos, or go into this group and was to establish psychological safety fast so that people could have the tough conversations. And why appreciation is so important is because I realized doing that work is that if we were going to have those tough and extremely sensitive conversations about the history of the conflict, about the issues that were going on between finance and HR, why people weren't talking to each other and they were spending time talking about each other, then we need to establish that safety to be able to do that. And one of the things that needed to happen and needed to be there is that people needed to feel valued. Because when I was doing my research on recognition in the workplace, one of the things that I found, I did over 400 interviews on the subway in Boston about the role of recognition in the workplace. And what I found that was most interesting is that when people feel valued, They relate to feedback as a contribution, but when they don't feel valued, it occurs as criticism or worse, an attack. And when we need to be able to have tough conversations, we need to have that base of relationship. And so today I want to reframe what is appreciation and the role that it really plays in our relationships at work. And by the way, it also works at home as well. Okay. So Matt shared that this is my work. This is what I've been doing. And I run retreats and I give keynotes within organizations. I facilitate dialogues and just help people open lines of communication and keep them open. Now, I will have some handouts for today. And if you'd like them, just send an email to my practice manager, Christine at beyondthankyou.com, and just put in subject IW Summer 2024, and she'll know which ones to be able to send to you. And all the slides and some of the resources I shared today will be included in that. And we'll send it off to you afterwards. Okay, so the reason why appreciation is so important and so important right now is that we've spent 4 years being pickled in anxiety, from the pandemic to Ukraine, inflation, change, uncertainty, loss, war, political divisions, racial injustice, and everything that we've been facing. And I'd argue that we're going into the next round of that right now. And it's just about to get amped up. I know for the folks in the UK, you just had a change of prime minister. In France, you just had a snap election. And in the US, well, we just had a assassination attempt, right? And I think things are so charged right now, or I don't think they are. And I think that we need to account for that uncertainty tax in our workplaces, is that we need to remember, similar to, if you remember back into the pandemic, the amount of weight that people are holding on, how fast people were jumping on each other and getting frustrated, right? Because we are not just dealing with our work and what's going on in our personal life. We have the uncertainty of what's going on politically around us right now. And that's why we need to double down on that relationship building. Because if you think about it, our cultures, and most people don't relate to this way, but our cultures are actually a conversation that gets generated by the things that we talk about in the office and the actions that we take. And like a path that forms in the grass from constant use, as soon as people stop going down that path, the grass and the weeds start to regenerate. And it's the job of every single employee in our organization to be able to keep those conversations alive. And why it's also important right now that we double down on appreciation. And I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to redefine that in a second, is those conversations. And actually, let me jump ahead 2 slides and I'll come back. Is I want to redefine what I mean by appreciation, because many people, when they think of appreciation, they often think of rewards and awards, or they think of the recognition platform. And I want to address what I see as a major terminology problem that we need to realign about within our organizations. Is many people collapse rewards and awards, those gift cards, those trophies, those whatever it is, with recognition, where rewards and awards aren't appreciation or recognition in themselves. They're a delivery tool for a message. And so when I take that and I take this terminology, I break it down to what I call my inverted pyramid of importance, with appreciating the person at the top. These are those day-to-day signals that we send to people that we value them. Hey, you know what? I know you just had a trip to go see your family. How was it? How did it go? Talking about what Alya just shared in the last session. Hey, I know it's really hot outside. I know it's cold outside. I know that, things are a little bit rough right now. How are you doing? Good morning. Those small signals that we send to people that form the basis of our relationship. And then acknowledging the circumstances. And this is extremely important right now. And if you remember during the pandemic, when people were down staff and people were still coming in, and many people were down staff still. Hey, thanks for working when we're down staff right now. Thank you for coming in. I know that there's a lot going on. I know there's been a lot of change in our department. Hey, I know we just had a senior leader quit right now. I know there's been a reorg right now. It's showing people that we understand what they're dealing with both inside and outside of work. And we don't always have a solution, but we need to be able to acknowledge it. And then it's recognizing effort and progress. Okay. And so recognition, many people think we're only going to recognize people when they produce a result. But imagine for a second, and we got a lot of people from the UK on here. So imagine that somebody's on the football pitch, and I mean like real football, not what Americans call soccer, or in the US on the basketball court. And imagine that you were a player on the court or on the pitch, and you were playing your heart out, and everybody's up there saying, we're not going to clap, we're not going to cheer unless you win the game. Hey, imagine how hard you'd play, right? Is recognition, is the encouragement, it's the cheering on, it's the recognizing the effort, the progress we're making along the way message that we're sending out to our people. And that's what I mean by recognition. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes here. Okay. And then we want to reward the results, and we want to award the standout results. And the goal of all of these things is send a signal to people that we value them. Now, to go back to why this is so critically important right now is for people's mental health. As we are going through this pandemic, as we are going through this political uncertainty right now, it's funny, you get into the habit of saying the pandemic for so many years, right? As we are going, and the other part is that my daughter actually is home with COVID right now. And so the pandemic has come back to me for the last day as we put masks on in my house. So we try not to get sick because my wife is going to London tomorrow. Okay, so one is this is a model for mature boy outfits, and why appreciation is so critically important right now is that if you're over on the side with the gray, is that when we push, we push, we push. When the amount of stress that is on our plate, whether it's the level or the amount of work on our plate, or the things that we are mentally trying to adjust for, what's going on in our society, the changes that are going in our company. I don't know if you've noticed, but you can sleep and still wake up feeling absolutely exhausted. And when we are exhausted, right, those things that are crises, things that wouldn't normally be crises start being crises, like going and doing a load of laundry. Things that weren't threats start being threats. And the thing that they found in their research is that sleep alone takes care of our body, but it doesn't take care of our mind. And we need to trigger what's called our parasympathetic nervous system into rest and recover, into the renewal cycle. And they found that 4 things were doing that: mindfulness or self-awareness, reflecting on where we're at, a sense of hope, compassion, and fun and laughter. And I saw this when I was running dialogues, is that when we were in this really intense conversation where people are talking about the history of conflict and they're sharing and they're starting to talk about all their frustrations and all the things that have gone on afterwards, if I wanted people to come out of that conversation, then I needed to do something to trigger that hope, that compassion, that fun and laughter, whether it was a game at dinner, whether it was joking around in the lunchroom afterwards at work, to bring people out of that conversation, to remind them of their human relationship. And that's why this stuff is so critical right now. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that we can do when it comes to updating our mindset about how do we start shifting this in our workplaces. So a couple of things that we need to remember in general is if we want to nurture that culture of appreciation that people don't want to leave, then one of the first things that we need to do here, let me put this up here and hopefully you can see that, okay, is one, updating our mindset about how do we do this. Now, many organizations, they double down on we need to improve our patient and customer experience, right? But people often forget that the improve an extraordinary patient and customer experience begins with an extraordinary employee experience. And these two are so intertwined that we need to remember that we can't improve one without improving the other. And there's a huge intersection between all of them here. And it's a short session today, but we have these 4 different quadrants that I use when explaining to leaders the interplay between patient customer experience and employee experience. Okay, up on the top left, when people are going heavy into patient and customer experience, we need to be better for our patients. We need to be better for our customers. Well, when all of our conversations are about taking care of the people that we're here to serve, we often neglect taking care of our people. And we neglect taking care of our people, it's unsustainable for our employees. Our good employees end up leaving. We're left with our bad employees, right? That ends up being bad for our patients, bad for our customers. And that's what I call the toxic quadrant down on the bottom. Now, over on the right, bottom right here, we have what's bad for our patients, right? But great for our employees, where we double down and take care of our employees, but we forget to take care of our clients and our customers, right? Ends up being bad for both. And up on the top left is that sweet spot that we're aiming for. And what many organizations forget is that we think we can double down. We can have the latest and greatest software and employee recognition programs and everything like that. But the truth is, if we want to actually improve that patient or customer experience, it always starts with checking in with our employees, always understanding what's going on to them, understanding why people are disengaging right now, what is going on, because many times it's in those conversations that we get the data we need to improve it. Okay. And I'm just going to quickly go over this next one too. And just a reminder that employee experience is constantly going up and down, and it's constantly impacting our customer experience because our customers, our patients are coming to meet us and interact with us in our facilities. but it's really going to be going up and down. Their experience is going to go up and down based on our employee experience. And that's why it's so critical that we remember that engagement is not some destination we reach with one-off actions and events and just bringing in a speaker for one day or one DEI session to say, okay, we've done it and check the box. We need to do that ongoing work with Alya to be able to dig in, to be able to change our culture, to get people talking about it, to embed it in. So it's not just a one-off, right? Because engagement is not a destination we reach. It's a status that we need to earn and we maintain. And we do it, right, with the little actions we do every day. Now, everybody talks about Gallup and the Gallup Q12, right? And we see these stats and we want to have higher levels of engagement because it's lower absenteeism, higher productivity, higher patient customer ratings, and all the rest. But one of the things that we don't often look at is what is it that actually creates that experience? And if you look at any survey that somebody's using, so we quote the results of the survey, but we don't look at the actual questions, which tell us the behaviors that actually matter most. Do you know what's expected at work? Do you have the materials and equipment to do your job right? At work, if you had the opportunity to do what you do best every day? In the last 7 days, have you received recognition and praise? Does your supervisor, someone at work, seem to care about you as a person? If you go through all of these, with the exception of maybe 2 of them, all of them require the manager or somebody at work to connect with our people. And one thing I just want to pause on here is the engagement scores, the highest level of engagement that Gallup has found across the world was in 2020. And then it started to drop again. And what was going on in 2020 is that senior leaders were reaching out and having regular conversations. They were sending updates with people. The communication was never higher. The check-ins were never higher with our people than in 2020 during the pandemic. And then we started getting comfortable. We don't need to give weekly updates. We don't need to give daily updates. And it started to drop again. I just want to put a little pin in that as a reminder, because many people realized, wait, why are we so high then? And now it's starting to drop again. Well, what were we doing back then when it came to our communication? And this is why it's important to remember that it's actually the little things that we do every day that actually build and maintain the relationships and cultures that people don't want to leave. And at the heart of the matter, people need to know that we appreciate and value who they are. And that's what Alya spoke about in that last section, is understanding everything that people are living through, right? Understanding what is it like to live your life? What is it like to be in your world? What is going on for you? And what is your experience here at work? I had a client that I was talking to the other day that had one person on our team that was so excited when they hired this person. And now this person doesn't show up for events with everybody else. This person's not performing. This person does the bare minimum. And she's talking about letting this person go. And then I was saying, hey, when we were having the conversation, I was like, hey, let me know a little bit about this person. Well, they don't do this, they don't do that. And then I asked, who's everybody on your team? What are people's backgrounds? And as I started asking questions without seeing it, all of a sudden, this person is Black. They are former military, and they're on a team that is all white. And I am guessing that if you check in to see that person's lived experience every day, then there's probably some things that are going on that's having that person not feel like they belong, not feeling like people get them, that people aren't checking in to understand. And I asked, have you ever had this conversation? Well, no, not really, because we are not valuing who people are, what they contribute, and what it specifically takes their job being them every single day. And the only way we find that out is checking in to ask with people. Okay. And we need to remember, right, is it's the little things that we do every day to be able to do that. So I want to jump over to recognition and why recognition is one of the critical things and one of many things that we need to be doing here. Okay. I think that should come up here. I just need to jump ahead slides wise. Okay. So we talked about all the different things. Why recognition? It costs nothing, right? It takes seconds to be able to do. We just need to shift people out of thinking that it's all about the rewards and awards. And that's many times why leaders don't do it. Okay. So given that right there, we already talked about the difference between appreciation, acknowledgement, recognition. And if you're looking for resource on all that, just send an email to Christine@beyondthankyou.com and she'll send us slides. Okay. And then the data of why it's important. Okay. The presence or absence of recognition when people, this was nurses, 13,000 nurses. When people got no recognition, turnover rate was 58%. It dropped to 34 when people got one compliment a month. Okay, so why is it that managers don't recognize employees even though they know they should, right? Is they often think they don't have time. They think it's HR's job and all the rest. And just because of time right now, I'm going to jump ahead. Here's the core reasons why people give for not recognizing people. They don't get what it is, the terminology problem. They think it's an HR issue. They don't think it's their responsibility, or they don't know how. But the biggest reason many times is our people are uncomfortable. And I did a thing a couple of months ago, and 70% of managers have never received training on how to effectively give and receive recognition at work. Now, what are the core components? And you can find a great article I did on how to give compliments at work, how to give and receive. And there's core components when we are going to recognize people. Okay. And I want to talk about the two different forms of recognition real quickly, and then share a couple different ideas. And then I will wrap up and bring it back to Matt in a second here, because my commitment is always to leave you with some concrete things you can use. Now, when we're recognizing people, it's similar to giving feedback. No one should ever be left with a question. Good job. Good job on what? Like, I recognized my daughter the other day, and this is what I do for Larry. I go, Alya, great job. And my daughter's Alya as well, which is really interesting. Is I go, Alya, great job on the soccer field today. Good job doing what? And I realized that I knew, but she didn't know what I saw. So just like when we're giving people feedback, they should never be left with a question of why we're giving their feedback and what. So we want to be specific. What did I experience or observe? So my daughter, you know what I saw out there the other day is that oftentimes you're scared of the ball. And I've seen you get scared of the ball in the past. And today, when this person came up to you, you did not get scared and you attacked the ball. And I hadn't seen you do that before. Okay. Focus on the process, not just the results. I get that you've been working on that you've been doing that. And this is all that practice you've been doing outside in our front yard is really paying off. And I love seeing you do that. And the impact on your team is that you're contributing more. Now, that is a personal example. So how do we bring it back to a work example? Hey, you know what? Thank you for coming in on time every day. I know it's your job to come in on time every day, but the fact that I never need to worry whether you're going to be here or not makes a huge difference for me. And the fact that you call in and let me know when you're going to be 5 minutes late or send me a text message, I can't tell you how much peace of mind that gives me and allows me to do my job better because I can plan accordingly. Thank you. Right? That's what we want to include when we're doing it. Now, one of the challenges with standard recognition is standard recognition. We are sharing how what somebody else did impacted us. And one of the challenges with that is that we don't see most of the time, and I would argue 98.35, which is a made up statistic percent of the time, we don't see the things that people want to be recognized for. We don't see what people are dealing with, what people are going through, right? And so we want to do, this is where I introduce the concept of reflective recognition. And this is an inquiry-based approach. Okay, and this came out of my conflict resolution work, which I don't have time to share that story today. But when we had a huge breakdown on our team, the thing that transformed it was this one activity. We had a 2-year toxic dynamic on our team. And when nothing else worked, this one activity, right, is what we do is we understand that we don't know what everyone's dealing with. We don't know what they're dealing with because they're working from home. I know Alya told me she just had to move out of her apartment because things were getting fixed and now it's come back. Well, she hadn't shared that. I wouldn't know that she was dealing with that as well. I know that Matt was saying that he just came back from a bunch of trips. Well, we often don't know what people are going through and what they're dealing with. So what we can simply do is when we come into our one-on-one or meeting is just invite people. Hey, we haven't spoken in a while. What is it you've been working on? What is it you're proud of? And as that person's sharing, we want to bring their attention to, like, how were you able to do that? What was it like to be able to work while these things were going on for you? How were you able to get that done with everything else that was going on in your life, right? And then all we have to do is give that person the opportunity to share with us, because many times that's the recognition process. A dear mentor of mine, Mark Goldstein, who wrote the book Just Listen, who sadly passed away last year, has one of my all-time favorite quotes. It's less important what we say to others than what we empower others to say to us. Now, here are a couple small things that you can do when it comes to appreciation and recognition in your workplace, just to up the number of positive interactions we're having with our people. Well, here's a senior leader tip. If you're a senior leader in an organization, and if you're not a senior leader, then you can share this idea. And I've got a video on my YouTube channel that explains this. And one question. So every senior leader meeting and anyone who's managing managers, just ask the question, who's somebody on your team who flies under the radar but did really great work this week? And by asking that question, right, some leaders, their hands may go right up, and other leaders, I've got no clue, right? But what it's going to do is if you ask that question every single meeting, leaders are going to start coming ready to share. And then the follow-up question, what did you do to let that person know that you value them? What did you do to let that person know that you value them? And just by asking that question, right, those managers are going to spend the week scanning their teams, their meetings, their interactions for those great stories. And another one to add into it, who's a person on another team that really supported your team this week? So those questions trigger and focus our attention for our leaders to look at what's working. Now, another simple thing that you can do on your team or in your organization is, and this is regardless of your level, one of my all-time favorite practices. And if you use Teams, if you use Slack or in chat, or if you just do it via email or in your meetings, is have people every Thursday around noon just post the question, what were your small victories this week? And it gives people an opportunity to share. Hey, one of my small victories was being on the Inspiring Workplaces summer series this summer. Okay, it was not having a second glass of wine last night. It was not yelling at my daughter when I was frustrated the other day, right? Is you give people an opportunity to share those things that are going on in their world. I am in a group of speakers, and every single week I do this activity, and it's one of my greatest self-care practices because it has me pause from thinking about all the things I didn't do to thinking about all the things that I can do. Okay. Now, some other resources that are available to their out there for you. Okay. Is one, stay conversations, is getting our managers or leaders to be able to sit down and have those conversations other than an exit interview because the person's already leaving. Two, what can I do to make sure you're having the kind of experience that people want to stay? You'll find this video. There's a whole video on how to do it. And I got an article in Harvard Business Review, and it's called How to Know If Your Employees Are Happy at Work, but it's really about how to run stay conversations. Then there's another video on how to have growth conversations there. And then with that, I just want to wrap up with one thing here. Okay. Is we just need to remember, and by the way, here are the handouts. Send a message to Christine@beyondthankyou.com, and I'll include some additional resources in there. But I think the big thing that we need to remember that if we want to navigate the challenges that are coming up in the year ahead with the political uncertainty, with everything that's going on with the world, with the uncertain economy right now, right? People are going to be charged. And we need to make sure that the only conversation that we're having is not just about what's going on in the politics of our world. We need to be having those regular conversations about what's going right, about what's going on, about building our relationships. And just to remember that if we're not building relationships, they're breaking down. So we need to do one little thing every day to show people that we value and we appreciate that. And with that, I will say thank you. And I know I am right at the end of our time right here. But if you have any questions, happy to engage, reach out anytime.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And just trying to use some of what I've been learning. Great job, Chris. As you've made me really think of a topic that we've covered so widely, but I'm thinking about it in a totally different way now. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And I also love the small victories, but there's obviously a recurring theme going through there around dialogue and culture as conversations. Yeah. And I want to ask you lots about your views of the world right now, having had those created those dialogues in those places where dialogue is very hard to have. But we could probably talk about that for hours. I was just interested in obviously peak engagement in 2020, and you
fascinating, huh?
Reference, regular updates. But do you think that's also got to do with the fact that it wasn't just updates, but leaders were being more visible? So it was, we actually saw them as human beings. We saw them in their kitchens with their kids, with their dogs. And it's all of a sudden, okay, I'm hearing more from you, but I actually fantastic. There we go. Case in point,
we saw the humanity of people. We shared our kids, our families came in, and I thought we brought our humanity back. And I intentionally wore my bathing suit today for this one. It's 200 degrees in my office right now. I think a big portion of it is that I think during 2020, we started sharing our humanity more. But people so last week I ran a retreat for a call center team at Bright Horizons. They're a big, you have them in the UK, but mostly in the US. And what we did is we mapped out the last 4 years. It's the first time they'd been together in person again since 2020, since the work from home mandate. And we mapped out everything that had happened. And then we looked at the level of communication that had gone on in the beginning. We were having weekly updates. The managers were saying what was going on because there were updates to give. But people stayed connected because we were talking more back then.
Yeah.
And if you look at just, I don't know. I mean, I can't turn my camera because that's the messy side of the room over there. This is the clean side. But if you look at every single leadership book you have, right, there's nothing new. We need to have conversations. Don't be a jerk. Understand what's going on in people's worlds. Check in with people. Call out bad behavior, right? To have people show up and feel safe in the workplace. Like, we know what matters most. And the thing is, we were really intentional about it. And then kind of like my weight when I have a lot of speaking, when I'm on the road for a long time, all those systems in place, those things that we were doing, all start to fall out the door. And so we need to remember, hey, I need to be in regular communication. I need to be checking in with people. I need to give updates. And that update doesn't need to be anything changed this week because there's no big update. But you know what? Let me interview Matt, who is a great performer on one of our teams, about his career path. How did he get to where he got to? What is it you're thinking when you have a call with a customer? What is it you do to be able to facilitate meetings the way you do? And use those updates just to have people see our faces, stay in touch. And also, when we interview one person on our team, when we talk to one employee on our team, when we recognize one person on our team, other people feel seen as well.
Yeah. I've got so many questions, but the last one I'll give you is dialogue and conversation and the proliferation of IT and AI.
Yep.
Does it matter how you're conversing with somebody? Do you have to be in person? Can it be on a Google call? Do you just have to do all the right things that you're supposed to do to have a good conversation? Does where or how you have it matter?
100%. I think that, I want to go back to something Alya said in the last one. I used to do anti-bias workshops and anti-bullying workshops in school. And she said something I hadn't heard in a long time is the difference between intent and impact.
Yeah.
And many times we will say something that offends somebody. We'll say something that has somebody feel like they don't belong. Now, when we have a relationship and we've done the work to build the relationship, then that person tells us directly. When we don't have the relationship, they tell HR or they tell the BBC. Right? We saw it with Boeing. And that, I think that it does matter. And it matters that we slow down enough to just think about, hey, you know what? How are we running meetings on our teams? Having those regular check-ins. You can't build those relationships if you're not having your regular one-on-ones. And those 15 minutes a week, but just checking in, because that person's going to tell you that when we come to the call, that we remember that we have no clue what that person was dealing with the last 6 days since we talked to them last. We have no clue what happened in their world, right? Yeah. And so remembering that, and then when we're having that dialogue, right, resetting those ground rules for our meetings, having, our way of how we're going to call out bad behavior, right? Yeah. Or, changing our background to red when somebody says something offensive and just saying, hey, you know what? That wasn't cool there. Oh, you know what? You're right. But doing that, and I think that once we call out the bad behavior, we call out the fact that we don't always have the answer, that we regularly check in with our people, about, how are we doing at building, maintaining relationships? If we do that, just like our relationships at home, with our friends, with our family, right? If we're not checking in, if we're not doing things to consciously build them, they are going to break down.
Fantastic. So much more I want to ask, but I think that's a perfect place to finish. So I what's to say? It's my brain's gone down. I can't think of the phrase now, but it's worth waiting for, and it's definitely been worth waiting for, Chris. So thank you so much.
Great to finally meet, Matt. Thanks for having me on.
And I hope it's not the last thing we do together.
I hope not.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I'll let you get out of the office and cool down. And absolutely fantastic. That's a first. So you also
it's a virtual mullet, business on top and athletic wear on the bottom. Right?
Amazing. Well, on that note, thank you so much. Enjoy the summer and
take care. You as well. I look forward to being in touch soon. Take care, Matt.
Take care. Bye-bye. Bye. What another fantastic day of learning and insight, reflection, and just trying to improve the way we do things. So thank you so much to Alya and Chris. Lots to think about. And we'll be back again for the final day 4 of the summer series tomorrow. And if you're watching on demand, we've got so many other sessions that you should go watch after this. But for now, thank you for watching, everybody, and take care. Bye-bye.